Well, here we are in New Orleans, site of Super Bowl 59 with the great Brian Billick, world champion coach of the Baltimore Ravens. And we got Mike Smith, one of your former assistants and great head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Great to see you, Coach.
See you.
Thanks for joining
Better
me.
yet, my brother-in-law.
That's hard to
Married
believe.
to sisters. How about
I
that?
had no friends when I was coaching. At least you had one.
That's the only
friend.
reason we were able to connect.
I want to just go back to your beginning where I first met you. Yeah. You were the computer whiz. You were the guy that really
we were ahead of our time.
Helped bring football and technology together with the 49ers. Just a quick summary.
Well, you know, we were back at a time, and it's hard for people to appreciate, particularly young people, that particularly now where we're just, infested with technology, that this was pre-internet. This was just as the beginning, the old Apple computer we used to have, and how you had to used to deal with it. But it just made sense, particularly both of us coming out of the Bill Walshian teaching progression. It's all about the teaching. It's all about dealing with the players. And the resource it was for us to actually put the game planning together. Before, we're all of the old age where you used to cut up the 16-millimeter film.
Yep,
now you tell people that, and it's like, what the hell did you used to do? The old 16, to make your cut-ups, cutting up the 16-millimeter film and redrawing with the templates every week, the game plan, the mind-numbing, that the computer was just a natural way to make that a better teaching progression. And you were right there with us. We took.
I was the first guy to use Super Paint 1.0
That's,
and actually draw.
Super Paint.
That's
way back, man.
Brian Billick, nobody really knows this. Here's a guy that played tight end, had a little cup of coffee in the NFL.
Right.
And I heard you were on a match game show.
That's amazing.
Got
to make money somehow.
Yeah. Well, you got eliminated on the show. You got your
real
butt
quick.
kicked.
I got as typical 0 points.
Do you have any footage of that?
You know what? It's amazing. I don't go a month that someone doesn't bring that up. I saw you. I don't know how that now with the internet and going on, and because I'd just been cut by the Cowboys. I went back to Southern California where I lived, working at a spa with housewives and businessmen, and they're watching game shows all day. So I'm watching that, and I go, well, I can do that, and I need money.
Yeah.
So they were based in L.A., so I go in and interview for it, and they get me on the match game, and it was amazing. It was. Hey, here's one. I'll ask you the question. In fact, I become the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens. Now this was, I did the match game 40 years ago.
Yeah.
45 years ago. So I'm sitting down, and I'm the head coach, and you do the interviews, and you go in this room and that room, and I sit down, and the guy goes, ESPN, they're going to bank stuff, for they can use during the whole year. So he's firing a number of different questions at me, going, okay, about this, and about that, and the other. And he goes, okay, I got this one last question for you. The doctor ran out of thermometers, so he measured Mary's temperature with his what?
What?
I'm going,
what was the answer?
Are you on drugs? What are you talking? Then it dawned on me. That was the question from the game show. The match game. You remember the match game used to be they put out a sentence and they leave it blank and
was
then
that
you
Wink Markendale? Wink?
No, that was the guy with the big phallic microphone, Gene Rayburn.
Yeah, Gene Rayburn.
Big old microphone, and
kind of look in his eye.
But that was my last question. The doctor ran out of thermometers, so he measured Mary's thermometer with his what?
What'd you say?
Now this is national television. I know what I wanted to say.
Yeah, what did you say?
I said a pencil. I did. That's why I got 0 points, John.
What would you have said? Yeah, why your face is so red?
I wouldn't have been a pencil. It would have been something else.
Finger or something. But
But anyways, you have this Stanford background. I always looked at you. You had these 3 and 4 syllable words you used. You were always
absolutely
Stanford, Denny Green. Your upbringing was very cerebral.
That's right.
And do you remember the West Coast terminology that we were taught?
Absolutely.
Rip some off for our listeners.
God, just the I can't like you, 22Z in and jet right Z drive, flanker, whatever. Yeah, it was amazing because I was, that's how I began.
Yep.
In that terminology, and then Denny, I was Denny to Stanford, then we go to Minnesota when you're in Green Bay, and Denny. And everybody, it turns out, was running the West Coast stuff. You guys were in Green Bay. They were doing the same thing in Chicago, Detroit. So he says, no, we got to do something different. He loved the West Coast. So we bring in a guy with the Joe Gibbs system. That
Jack
verbiage.
Burns.
Jack Burns.
Yeah.
And he integrated the whole, in the bunch, and where the protections were, in the West Coast system, the protections were numbers.
Yeah.
22Z in, 25 Hank, that type of thing. And the routes were the verbiage. Well, in the Joe Gibbs, the protections were verbiage, and the routes were all numbered, which really does make more sense. Bill never forgave me.
So you changed your terminology.
I changed, and we ran the West Coast principles, but we changed the terminology, and Bill never forgave me for that I was not using, because quite frankly, the other verbiage made more sense.
I stayed with it all the way
yes,
to
you
2018.
did. Oh, and you spit it out in such a
changed
beautiful
it
way.
in 2018, but their interpretation of offense in Minnesota was different than anything I've ever seen. Now,
Well, 'cause we had
you
players
walked out
like
Randy Moss, you walk out Chris Carter, Jake Reed, the tight end was a player, and Robert Smith's a running
Smith
back.
on top of it.
And then you have Randall Cunningham, a guy I couldn't coach. I couldn't reach Randall in Philly. But just a quick summary of what you guys were doing in Minnesota.
Well, as you know, it's always the talent, and the key was what can we wrap around so many gifted athletes, and I give credit to those guys that they bought into it, because Chris Carter is brilliant, but he wants the ball every snap.
They all do. All great ones do.
But to recognize, well, you know what? We got this asset in Randy and Robert Smith in the back. It was magical. It was great because it got to the point we actually never looked at film of the opponent, because what was happening is that we were so dynamic in talent, whoever we played, they were doing something different. They would come in, well, we can't do what we do. We got to do something different.
Yeah.
Which, good news, bad news. The bad news is, okay, you got to figure out what they're doing. The good news is they didn't do it very well, because they didn't know what they were doing, because they were changing it. But it didn't do any good to look at film and show the players, well, this is the way they do this, and they do this on third and medium, and here's their cover two, and here's their tamper two. And then when you get in the game, they do something totally different. So the players, we got really good at, guys, we know what we do, and we'll start out, and we know what the response is. That was the great thing. No matter what you gave that team defensively, you want to roll up and take away Moss? You want to bracket Chris Carter inside? You want to build the 8-man box for Robert Smith?
Yeah.
Well, we got an answer. So
Yeah.
if you're going to do this, we
It
simply
sure
do
made
that.
you look like a genius.
Oh,
It had a
my
lot
God.
to do with you getting
Oh,
that
my
Raven
God.
job, right?
Yeah, oh, shit.
But I
Are you
mean, as a
kidding?
defensive coach, when you were going up against them, if you played split safeties, Robert Smith was going to kill you.
Yeah.
He was gonna
And as
wear
soon as you
out.
went single high, Randall would just look over there. How did you deal with the Viking defense?
Well,
the Vikings offense.
it's hard. It's hard. They always were one step ahead of you. Didn't matter. You wanted to play with 12 men on the field, and you had a chance. That's about the only damn way I ever figured it out, because it's a slow death. They're gonna score points. They did. You've done it to me too.
Well, it's the field goal, Gary Anderson, the Atlanta Falcon game.
Amazing.
Just
I remember Gary.
Yeah.
Gary was a great guy.
Great kicker. He
As you
kicked
know,
Russ in Philly.
kickers are hard to like.
He didn't miss a field goal all year.
All year long.
Yeah.
We're playing Atlanta. We're getting in position. I remember, like it was yesterday, we're getting down in the red zone, and we got a real third and long, and I'm asking Denny, I go, well, you want us to go for it, or you would just set up the field goal? Field goal, the game's over. And Gary hadn't missed all year long. He says, just set up the field goal. So we run a inside gut or whatever, and we get it down. And I figure we're going to I turn around.
Yeah.
Gary runs out. I'm going to get Gatorade because we're going to the Super Bowl. And I hear the old Metrodome,
Yep.
the groan, just,
Yeah.
the groan. And he had missed. And Gary's a hell of a guy.
Now, was that your last game in Minnesota as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah.
So that whole thing crumbled a little bit. A lot of players left, coaches left.
Well, as is the way of the NFL,
Yeah.
things change. But and that team too, because Randall was kind of on the back end of it, and we go back. This cap is just beginning to come into play.
Yeah.
So we're now dealing with all of a sudden. What do you mean these guys are going to leave?
Yeah.
So like everything, it changes on you. But that was a special group. It was a special year.
Boy, I used to get pissed at you, man. I mean, I'd pick up the stat sheet, and I see Minnesota 488 yards, 390 yards passing. And then that Monday night game against Green Bay when Randall threw
Phenomenal.
for 500 yards in the rain,
Phenomenal.
You were the hottest candidate by far.
I was the flavor
But I
of the
just
month.
I want young coaches to hear about that, because right now we've seen 6 or 7 head coaches just get hired.
Sure.
And they're the hot assistant coaching candidates.
And that's what it
just
is.
like you were.
That's
But
what it
when
is.
you went to the Ravens, the Baltimore Ravens weren't the Baltimore Ravens. They had just moved to Baltimore, right? But
Yeah,
just
and
a quick summary of some of the opportunities.
So
you had.
the game's over, and you know how the process goes. And because we're doing so well, and I'm kind of the flavor of the month, and so there's opportunities that room. And at that time, remember, they couldn't talk to us.
Yeah.
Until the season was over. And we're going to beat Atlanta. We're going to this. That was just a foregone conclusion. That's how good that team was. And so all of a sudden, it's a shock that we're done. And I remember my agent was there, and so now I'm available. Now people can talk to me. So I take my girls home. I come back downtown. My agent's there. It's like midnight, 11 o'clock, and there's a number of different teams that want to get into the discussion. It was Baltimore, it was Cleveland, which I didn't appreciate at the time, the fact that it was Baltimore and Cleveland, the Cleveland franchise where Baltimore had left. So the competitiveness between Carmen Policy, our good friend from the San Francisco 49ers, was running, and Dwight Clark, who I knew Dwight. I was on the staff in San Francisco when we drafted Dwight. I picked Dwight up at the airport when he was a rookie, just a 9th round pick. And
That was
just
a tough decision you had. Tough.
It was, and then Kansas City was in San Diego, and the agent did a nice job of kind of just putting it, okay, here's baseline, and the salaries. It was great for me. It was by happenstance that the salaries jumped from, a certain level. Our head coaches, Mike Holmgren and Denny Green, were making great at the time head coaching money, which was at the time $800,000, $700,000. And all of a sudden now, and when Andy came in to Philadelphia, it just jumped. And the numbers now it's minuscule compared to what they're paying the coaches.
Why'd you pick Baltimore? I mean,
I'll tell you what, it was interesting, because Baltimore was going through some difficulties with Art Modell and the ownership. You weren't sure, but Denny Green, who was just such a great mentor, like Mike was for you, Holmgren, and Denny was great to take me through the process. And he was like that good recruiting parent. He wasn't going to tell me what to do, but he would kind of, well, maybe you need to think about this. Denny cut it was great. Denny, because you know how it is. You become that candidate, and now the name's popping around, and people want to talk to you, but still I'm coaching games. So how do I got to show I'm still committed to this, but you got to address it. And Denny was great, because you don't want to go to the coach and ask a bunch of questions, because he's going to question, well, what are you thinking about right now? So Denny said, tell you what, Friday afternoons, when we're done with practice, that's your time. You come in and we'll talk. So it was kind of like, you take care of business, and then Friday afternoons, let's talk about, and whatever you want to talk about, however I can help. And Denny, I did not know Ozzie Newsome, but Denny obviously did. And Denny, I got the feeling Denny recognized, he thought Ozzie and I would work very well together. And ultimately that was the difference, that when it went through it and I could recognize Ozzie's perspective with it. And Carmen and Dwight were great on the Cleveland side, because I knew them. But I just thought the fact that Cleveland was a brand new franchise, so that's a bit of a grind. But I just thought in Baltimore that I liked Art Modell. A lot of people don't, appreciate that. Art was a great, great man. But Ozzie, the relationship with Ozzie, I thought, okay, as you know, that's pivotal. Yeah. You got to have a great relationship with the GM. I thought we could win with this.
So where the heck do these two young ladies come into this? I mean, are there just
really?
two?
Tell that story.
Now, wait a second. The way I'm imagining this, there's these two sisters, and you two scoundrels.
Like two
come
sailors
into the
on shore
picture.
leave, huh?
So you guys are married to sisters.
Yep.
Now, I want to hear from you first.
Okay, my side of the story?
Yeah, I want to
okay.
hear because I know you'll tell the truth. I don't trust Billy.
Yeah, but mine will be a better story.
Yeah, his will be a lot better story. No. So we were coaching together at San Diego State. I'm a young coach, and I had just came from Canada, tried to be a football player. That didn't work out. The coach that cut me said, I told him, I said, I got a chance to be a coach, He says, you do? He says, yeah. I says, Coach, do I really have a chance to make this team? He said, Coach said, you need to go coach.
Yeah.
So, Ray Yock, I'll never forget that. So I go to San Diego State. Brian's there, and he had something to do with the media or something. And he said, hey, would you mind taking my sister-in-law out? She's in town from Dallas. I looked up at him. I said, Brian, does she look like Kim, his wife? He said, yeah. I said, I'm in. That was it. It was
Unbelievable.
So we went on a blind date, and we're 45 years later now, or 46 years later.
You got any secret sauce to add to this, or anything?
Well, the fact of the matter was, Julie doesn't like me telling the story, but Mike originally came to us as a GA, and we've all been GAs. You don't make squat. You don't have any money. So, and she had been there for a while, and I knew she needed to do something else. We were busy, so I thought, well, I'll get Mike to take her out on a date. But I couldn't I said, I got to give him some money. I got to take her out on a date, because I know he doesn't have any money. Now, as the story goes, it gets bigger. I'm up to the point where I'm going, I had to give the guys $500 to take you out. No, I gave him like $20, but the amount gets bigger and bigger as I retell the story. But yeah, it's been great because now with all the family reunions and all the stuff, after about 2 minutes, Mike and I are talking ball and diagram plans and diagram plays and talking ball the whole time. So it's been great. Been great.
The journey of coaching it's unbelievable. It's you get hired and you work your way to get another job. You get hired again, and then inevitably we're all going to get fired.
That's right.
And I've been traded, fired, trampled on. It's just part of this business. But your ability to adapt to what you had as a coach, I think, says a lot about you. I mean, the West Coast offense with the 49ers, very intricate, very wordy, a lot of plays, a lot of formations. You go to Minnesota and you say, hell, it's 6 in the box, we're running it. Right. If it's 7 in the box, we're throwing it. And you did it better than anybody.
Well,
and then you go to Baltimore, and let's be honest, players make us good coaches.
There you go.
I mean, who are we kidding?
Absolutely, John. The players are the reason we've had the success that we've had.
But the cool thing is when you go to Baltimore, it doesn't happen right away. Because I got my first win against Baltimore as a Buccaneer.
That's right.
I don't even think you guys scored. I think
Yeah,
it was
probably not.
It was
probably not.
I'm like, look at that offensive wizard now.
That's right.
I'm talking trash across the
That's
field to
right.
him. Look at you now. How's it feel, Billick?
Yeah, that's right.
And a couple of years later, you and Ozzie start getting players. And forget about players for a second. Tell me of who you had on your defensive staff when you won the Super Bowl.
That was that group, as you know, that's the big key of bringing the staff together.
Yeah.
And I brought in Marvin Lewis was there, and I did not know Marvin. Mm-hmm. But when we were in Minnesota last year, we played Baltimore, and Marvin, with not a great team, I thought did as good a job against us as anybody that we had played. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to interview Marvin for the job. Now I already have in mind Mike. I know Mike's going to come on the staff. Jack Del Rio, who I'd worked with a little bit in Minnesota. He was on the
both head coaches. Marvin Lewis, head coach.
Right. Rex Ryan,
head coach.
So I'm going to bring in Donnie Henderson. So I'm going to bring in some personalities. So I know who the defensive staff's going to be. I knew that ahead of time. I hadn't decided on a coordinator. I was talking to Gunther Cunningham and some other people, but I thought, I got to talk to Marvin. And I tell the story too. As you know, I get hired. I go down to the Senior Bowl, because that's where all the coaches are, right? And you're going to interview them. I already know what my staff is on the defensive side, unique to, before hiring a coordinator. Marvin comes up to the suite, because as you know, I don't leave the suite the whole week. You're at the Senior Bowl, because everybody's looking for jobs. It's like you got, some kind of magic, so people are all over you. So I'd have my guys go out and say, hey, have this guy come see me. So Marvin comes up, and Marvin and I laughed about this. When we were done with that interview, not only did I not want to hire Marvin, I never wanted to see the son of a bitch again. It was the worst interview in the history of football. Marvin was emotionally, he loved being in Baltimore, loved the situation, and was really distraught that they got fired. So I get done, and I've got the staff ready to go, and I think, that's not right. I got to talk to Marvin again. Something was wrong. So I reconnect with Marvin, have a better conversation, and I said, okay, I want you to stay and be my defensive coordinator, but here's the flip side. I've already got your defensive staff. And it was, I give Marvin a great deal of credit because these guys, all great, competent coaches. Can you imagine sitting in the meetings?
No, I can't.
Having to defend what they're looking at. You're going through the film of the previous year, and the new guys are just ripping it in shreds.
Yeah.
Why'd you do this? Well, Marvin, we thought it was a good idea at the time. Marvin did a phenomenal job of absorbing the personalities. And the one thing that I did, being on the offensive side, and that's why Mike was there, Mike and I grew up together in terms of we all do learning, okay, what's the process? How do I want the teaching to go? How do I want practice to go? So Mike was there really to be the liaison with Marvin to say, okay, this is what Coach wants in terms of the teaching sequence and how we're going to practice. So he had an access to that. And Marvin adapted, and he took these strong personalities and put together a hell of a defensive staff.
Yeah.
And a hell of a team.
Yeah, and it was some hell of a defensive staff meetings. Can you imagine Rex, Jack talking? Hey, we scrimmaged football.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, on Monday mornings, it was almost like a scrimmage. You'd come out sweating, John. I mean, we get it right, but it was a battle.
It was fun.
It was
together.
a blast.
It had to be fun putting game plans together. I remember when we played the AFC Championship game. I mean, congratulations on winning the Super Bowl, but you had to eliminate us in the way. But we had a hell of an offensive team. We had a hell of a team.
That was a great offense.
You knocked my quarterback out of the game, which we'll talk about another time. But the players that you had on defense. I mean, Siragusa and Sam Adams and McCrary. Was it McCrary?
McCrary.
Peter Boulware and McCrary on the edges.
Yeah, then you got
Goose and Sam Adams in the middle.
How about the post safety, Ed Reed? And then you got McAllister and Starks at corner.
And Rod Wood.
Yeah, and Rod Wood. I'm like, where do we attack this team, man? But just your recollection of that defense that made them, forget about the talent. What else was it that people need to know about the Raven defense that year?
Well, I think everybody knows that we had a group of characters. Starting with Tony Siragusa. I mean, he was a clown. I mean, and he fit in with that group of guys, and he was like the happy-go-lucky guy. But when it was time to work, we worked, but we had a lot of fun. Ray was, I loved the way and interacting with Ray as a coach because Ray wanted to know, and he had an idea of how he wanted it to be done as well. And it was, him and Marvin had a great relationship, and we all scrimmaged every meeting. I mean, when we talked putting a game plan together, it was a scrimmage. Shaq Harris used to tell me after a couple years later, he'd say, man, he says, I used to love to hear that defensive plan going in. He says it was like a full-on scrimmage. You could hear it all the way down the field or all the way down the hallway.
Yeah, I remember Al Davis walking into me, and he says, we got to get to Ray Lewis. We got to block Ray Lewis. He's making every fucking tackle. I said, how do we get to him? We got Siragusa and Sam Adams right there. And then they cover the center and both guards. Wasn't that part of the recipe?
Absolutely. Ray clean to the ball. Make sure that nobody hits Ray, and he's going to run the alleys both ways. And you couldn't run the ball against us.
But see, I went through some of the same things you went through in Tampa. We had a great defense. We got Hall of Famers, Brooks and Barber and Lynch. And we got Simeon Rice. We got a great group over there. And offensively, we're over here. We're supposed to be these offensive geniuses, and we're just trying to get a first down.
Right.
We're trying to run out of clock at the end of the game. We're trying to get in field goal position to win the game however we can win it. How did you handle that transition going from this offensive genius to this guy that, okay, we're going to run Jamal Lewis, we're going to run Jamal Lewis again, and we're going to run him one more time?
I had to, and it took a while. It did, because you come in, and you have an offensive mentality. And this is what it takes if we're going to win a Super Bowl. You have to have this certain level. And it wasn't till I recognized, now wait a minute, this defense is truly special. Mm-hmm. And remember, it was a time, and you followed up the next year with your Super Bowl, and as did Bill in New England. That was at a time where we were kind of in a vortex of the great quarterback play. We had come out of the Montanas and the Marinos and the Elways. We had not yet come into the Mannings and the Breezes and those kind of guys. So you didn't have to go through the gauntlet of great quarterbacks in the playoffs so that you could win with just great defense. Mm-hmm. And the idea that you could do that, but then I realized that that's how we were configured. That defense is so special. We did have Jamal Lewis. If we just didn't turn the ball over and we were second in the league in rushing behind you. But if we just don't turn the ball over, if we can get, and as Ray always used to say, Coach, just get me 7. 3, we'll make it work, but just get me 7. If we get 7 points, it's over.
Yeah.
And he was right. And I give Trent Dilfer great credit for buying into, okay, this is what we got to do. Didn't suit, because, he's a quarterback. He wants to get numbers. He's looking for the next contract. But he understood, if we just play error-free ball, don't turn the ball over and run the ball, we can win with the defense. And that takes a mind shift. You got to change gears a little bit.
Do you remember the AFC Championship game? Now,
Very
let's be
well.
honest. Yeah. It's
I remember
3rd and 21, man. We got you guys backed up. We're going to get good field position. We're going to win the game. 3rd and 21, I think it is. You throw 200 jet lion, 4 slants.
Yeah.
And that goddamn Shannon Sharp is still running, man.
It's great play calling.
Great play calling.
Let me tell you what happened. I knew defensively what we were going to do that which is a bold-faced lie.
Yeah.
I told Matt Cavan, I said, Matt, just throw a slant. Try to get 10 yards so we're not punting out of the shadow of and let's just let the defense go from there. And you're right. Shannon catches that slant in
Right
the middle.
in front of me.
Oh,
I almost had a heart attack. Honest to God. But you forget about Jonathan Ogden, Jamal Lewis, Shannon Sharp. Let's go back to Ozzie Newsome.
Yeah.
Let me hear from you first, because I got one Ozzie Newsome story. What was it about Ozzie Newsome, honestly? Everybody says he's a great GM. He was a great tight end. What was it that made him a great GM the way you saw it?
He was so calm, and nothing fazed him. I mean, there's ups and downs with the football team, and Ozzie was always looking for a solution. And he may have been nervous behind the scenes, but whenever I saw him, he had a calmness about him, and he made decisions on players by taking in a lot of information. I think he was very like having information to make decisions, and he got everybody involved, from the coordinators all the way down to the lowest scout, the guy that's just gone out. And the way that they put together the board, the times we were there, it worked the way that Ozzie had set the board up. He just had a knack for doing that, and acquiring time.
He's the best listener I've ever been around, in terms of, like Mike would say, would have those mind-numbing readouts of all the players and whatever. And Ozzie really never said a lot, but he listened to everybody. And then he'd put you in a position. I remember the thing I loved about Ozzie, we'd go through the readings, and let's say we're looking at a receiver, or he'd say, Mike, Mike's coaching linebackers or coordinating. Mike, why don't you get with Phil Savage? I want you to look at this guy and tell me what you think. Just kind of out of the, just to get a different set, and then just listen. And never tried to, lead the conversation or bias it, going, well, I think it was just truly just a great listener. And I appreciate it as the head coach, because you talk about scrimmaging. I can't tell you how many times Ozzie and I would go in and maybe disagree on something, a player or whatever it is we're doing. Kind of, as Shaq would say, would scrimmage it around a little bit. And Ozzie would always say, okay, well, let's sleep on it. And I'd come in the next day, and I'd be damned if I would come in and go, well, I was thinking about Ozzie, you're probably right. And Ozzie would go, I was thinking about it too. No, I think you're right. Willing to say, no, let's look at it that way. I think that's the key to success. He's a great listener.
Yeah. And I think and that made him a great communicator. Yeah. I think the best communicators are the best listeners, because he takes it all in, and when he starts to speak, he knows what he is trying to get across, and it's succinct, and he was a great leader.
We played the Ravens in 2018, my first year back in coaching, and we didn't have a lot of speed on the Raider team, and we're known for speed. We had Jordy Nelson, who was hurt kind of in the end of his career.
Right.
We didn't have any speed. And I'm watching the Ravens in pregame warm-up. They would run their practice squad players. And I'm pissed off. I'm kicking my coordinator going, God, we don't have any speed. And Greg Olson, our coordinator, he goes, who the hell is that guy?
Yeah,
and we see this guy running like crazy. So we go ask one of our scouts, who is that? It was Darren Waller. So we signed Darren Waller on the flight home off of the Ravens practice squad. He becomes our best player.
Yeah.
He becomes a
Great
Pro
tight end.
Bowl force, man.
Yeah.
And I go to the Senior Bowl or the Combine the next year. I walk into Ruth Chris to have a glass of wine, and Ozzie's sitting at the bar. He goes, hey, Gruden, come here. That's the last freaking time I'm working out my practice
That's
squad,
right.
guys, before a
That's
game.
right.
But he was something else, man. I just want to have like a little word identification with some of these Raven players. If you could just say a few words about these players, top of mind. I'm going to give a couple to Smitty and a couple to you. Okay? Let me hear about, I want to hear about Ed Reed.
Field. He could cover the field. One word. You said
What
one
was
word.
it, like keying a quarterback or
He
preparation?
had he had great preparation, but he would line. You know how he would line up so deep so he could make all. He wanted to make everything in front of him, and he had great range. And I think that was his. And he was very cerebral.
Yes.
Very
Saw the
cerebral.
field.
Yeah, he
Saw
saw
the
the
field.
field.
He was the same alpha dog that Ray was, though, wasn't he? Or wasn't
A
he?
little bit different.
Yeah, I would say he not nearly as vocal. But he was a leader, but it was a different type of leading. He was cerebral, quiet, but he made the plays.
Tell me about Ogden, Jonathan Ogden.
Oh, you talk about cerebral. Boy, Jonathan was different in the sense that again, very cerebral, not verbal at all, very, very quiet. Truly the leader by example. He wasn't. Some people would get upset with Jonathan that he wasn't more verbal or more, come on, let's go, or but Jonathan was always.
What's the best thing he did on the field for you? I know everything.
Jonathan could recover from anything. He was so smart, such a huge man. But no matter what happened, if he made a mistake or stepped wrong, or someone could get an advantage, he could recover. He could recognize it and recover, and you just couldn't beat him that way because he was such a big athlete, such a great athlete. But he was so smart, he could recognize instantaneously, and adjust.
What about Ray Lewis? Give us some on Ray.
Oh gosh.
Give me some. You coached him.
Yeah, coached, leader. I've learned a lot of football from Ray Lewis. He was not only the leader on the field, but he was the leader in the locker room and in the meeting rooms. I'll tell you a story. My second year, so I'm working with Ray, and the favorite thing I like to do is go in and have breakfast with him on Monday and before the Tuesday meetings, because Ray would have a list of things that he saw. And my meeting with Ray, sitting down and having breakfast with him, was probably the most eye-opening thing every week. He was that kind of guy. What about this? I saw this, and he would get guys together to watch film. And when you've got a guy like that, it makes it easy to coach. But it was unbelievable the things that he would come up with and say, hey, have you noticed this or noticed that? And he would have meetings with Marvin, I know, the same way. And when you start talking about putting the game plan,
When I was doing Monday Night Football, I got to see the Ravens practice, and I got to see Ray. And his individual periods, he took that serious. He was all business, what I saw on the practice field.
There was only one way to do it, and it was full, it was full tilt, John. And when you have a guy like that that's in the Hall of Fame, it goes through the whole team, not just the –
I'll tell you, my favorite Ray Lewis story is when we broke the all-time defensive scoring record. And how lucky am I that I get to be a part of a team that breaks the all-time scoring record offensively in '98 with the Vikings. And then 2 years later, I'm with a group defensively that breaks the all-time lowest scoring defense.
Unbelievable.
A record that'll never be broken now for a lot of different reasons, not which because of the nature of the game and because of the number of games now. But So we're on the way to break this record. And in order to do that, you got to get a lot of shutouts. And these guys wanted the shutout record bad. And I used to run the scout teams. This is my way of touching all the players. So when defense is up, I'll run the offensive scout team. And then when offense is up, I'll run the defensive scout team, run the cards. And it's also a way of finding out what my coordinators are doing because, those line bastards will cheat you anytime. They'll tell, oh, yeah, we're going to blitz lot. And then, well, I'm not seeing it on the card. Yeah. So I'm running the cards all week, and our defense is on it. We're playing Cleveland. They're terrible. Spurgeon Wynn is their quarterback. I mean, we're going to kill them. And we're going to get a shutout. We're home. So I'm running the cards. We're on it. Well, we come out. They get the ball on the 20-yard line to start the game. They go 80 yards. Score. We're just stunned. Fans are stunned. Defense is stunned. I'm stunned. So I walk. The defense is coming off, and I'm walking off, and Ray's coming. He goes, "Don't say a word. I got it." So I'm going, okay, I'm a smart guy. I turn left and go to the Gatorade. I don't know what he said to that defensive group. Got them all together. We gave up 80 yards on the first drive. We gave up 110 yards total on the day. Damn near killed Spurgeon Wynn. They got 30 total yards in the remaining 3.5 quarters. I don't know what he said, but which was basically, we're better than this. We're not doing what we know, and boom, they went. That was the most unbelievable.
I remember when we played you guys in the AFC Championship game. The New York Jets. They put some yards on you guys. Vinny Testaverde got in a no-back set, and they scored 24, 27 points, something like that. And I remember one of our assistants comes running in there and says, wait till you see the film. The Jets, they got after their ass. And I said, uh-oh. That's not good. They're going to be pissed off about that. But Shannon Sharpe, I coached Sterling Sharpe. I loved coaching him in Green Bay. Just a quick couple things on Shannon Sharpe.
Pure professional.
Yeah.
The way he trained, meticulous about the way he trained, the way he ate.
Yeah.
Same thing. Just was an absolute pro in terms of his training methodology, and Shannon was huge for us because he is the one guy. I mean, they had some great players, but none of them had ever won a Super Bowl. Rod Woodson had been to a Super Bowl but had lost. Shannon had won a Super Bowl, so he was that touchstone of this is what we got to do. And this is how we got to perform. This is the level we need.
Was he vocal in the locker room like he is now?
Yeah.
I bet he was.
Between Shannon and I, we could suck the oxygen out of any room we're in a New York minute.
He was vocal in the lunchroom, in the meeting room, team meeting.
Yeah, so where do you see football now? I mean, you look at the game today. What's the biggest thing or two that's different about the game we're about to watch Sunday?
I think the biggest thing, at the end of the day, and I look at it in great detail, the game really hasn't changed that much in terms of the situational, the times you're in it, the number of short yardage, red zone, high red zone, all the situational offensive situations that we prepare for and defensively as well. And Mike can quantify this because he still does some work with the league. The transformation of personnel on the defensive side, where before, where you and I grew up with, it was kind of like 60% base, 40% nickel.
Yeah.
It flipped to about 40% nickel. Mike recently has done some work there. People are in base deep. Ones, they're smaller because they got to keep up with these spread offenses, so they're not as big. Is why the teams that want to get big and physical are doing so well because they're beating up on these smaller defenses. And they're in base defense less than 10% of the time now.
I know it.
That's the biggest change to me tactically.
Absolutely, and I think what you're seeing this year, it really stands out, is we've had 16 or 17, I don't know the exact number, of 1,000-yard rushers. They say it's a passing league, but they're running the ball, and I think the reason that we're seeing the success running the ball is there's 7 DBs out there on the field, and there's 4 of them that definitely don't want to tackle.
No.
It's changed that we put the little guys out there. So what are you going to do? You offensive guys, you're going to go out there and you're going to run the football and see if these guys want to tackle. And I think this year you see that in the 1,000-yard rushers. I know there's an extra 17th game, but the numbers I don't know that we've had a season like this where they've had that many 1,000-yard rushers.
Well, you had Matt Ryan. You had Matty Ice.
Matty Ice,
in
yes,
his
sir.
in his prime. I mean, you had him, and you had pocket passers your whole life.
Too many.
So did I. I mean, but
You're
when
talking to you instead of still coaching.
but when
I
you
had too
look at
many
the
guys.
game now, what I see is I see these turbo quarterbacks, man. I mean, these guys can put it down and create their own offense, and you can create plays for them that we never even thought about.
Right.
But the player safety piece is something else. I remember Al Davis saying, that quarterback's got to go down, and he's got to go down hard. Well, if you hit the quarterback hard now,
Penalty.
you get a 15-yard penalty or you get incarcerated, one of the two.
Or 15 grand.
Or 15,
if
20
it's your
grand.
second or
but,
third offense.
as a defensive coach, that's a pain in the ass, isn't it? Tough on you.
Well, it is, but this league is not going to continue to succeed if we don't have quarterbacks.
That's right.
I hate to say it, being a defensive guy, so we're at a disadvantage at this point in time. So you've just got to kind of work around it and realize that we're not going to have many 10-3 games. We're going to have yards being produced, and maybe they turn into touchdowns. And if you're a defensive guy, you can hold them to a field goal. You feel good about it. It's not like the year 2000, right, John? It's changed so much.
Are you superstitious? What's that thing you
No,
were
I
doing?
have routines.
No, well, you're weird. One of the two. But when you were coaching the Ravens, you would never let your players say playoffs or say Super Bowl. If they did, they told me you would fine them. I said, you can't fine a guy for saying.
That was
What were you saying? They had to say Maximus Exodus?
It was great. We got, because remember now, the Ravens had never had a winning season since their inception. So we're going on this run, and we got about, 3 games left, and we need another win to secure the playoffs. But we're heading that way. So we're playing San Diego, and I made it clear to the players. I said, you got to earn the right to talk about going to the playoffs and being a Super Bowl team. You're not there yet. So I don't want to hear, it was kangaroo court, but I don't want to, there's a fine for anybody in the building that mentions playoffs until we qualify for the playoffs. It was just kind of one of those coaching things you do. Well, our ticket manager comes and says, Coach, the league just gave us a directive that says we can start selling playoff tickets. I go, well, you better figure out another way other than playoffs, because I don't want to hear word playoffs from anybody in the organization. So they went back to the old Seinfeld, Festivus Maximus.
Really?
They decided to brand it. These are Festivus Maximus tickets, and that's the way they sold them.
Who came up with Festivus Maximus? Give me the name.
Actually,
Bob Eller.
Bob Eller.
Bob Eller was the guy.
And then Edward Mulatalo, our
So Ray
guard.
Lewis is saying Festivus. What's he saying?
No one. They couldn't Festivus Max. They couldn't say playoffs.
Yeah.
And then we beat San Diego here was the big thing though. We're playing and so now we beat San Diego. So I've been all this long said you haven't earned the right to say playoffs yet. I don't want to hear it. I'm going to fine you. We beat San Diego. I stayed up all night. The next team meeting, I gave them a day by day, practice by practice, all the way to the Super Bowl, our schedule. Mm-hmm. Saying, because I want them to know, okay, we've made a big deal. You can't say playoffs until we get into the playoffs, but I want you to know we know how to do this, and here's how we're going to do it. So I gave them every meeting, every practice, every day off, the entire schedule, all the way through the playoffs to the Super Bowl.
Wow.
And that caught their attention. Going, okay.
Well, you were trained by Bill Walsh. And,
Exactly right.
Bill Walsh, when I broke in with the 49ers, still today, I don't think it's close. Of all the football people I've ever met, there's nobody that will remotely touch Bill Walsh.
The innovation.
I was lucky.
The way we're practicing today and playing the game today is what Bill instituted back in the late 70s.
Shit, they were practicing with no helmets at full speed in 1990. I got the practice tape. I would show our players in Las Vegas, this is how we can practice if we cooperate with one another.
Right.
Ronnie Lott didn't want to hit Jerry Rice. They didn't want to get each other hurt, but they knew they needed to see it at speed and practice at full speed. And he was so far ahead of the game. And you wrote the greatest football book with Bill Walsh.
Yeah.
You can't even find a copy of The Winning Edge. If you guys are listening to me out there, The Winning Edge.
Finding the Winning Edge.
Finding the Winning Edge by Bill Walsh and Brian Billick. It's by far the greatest book. I think it's great for businesses. Anybody that wants to be successful, the schedule that you were talking about, the commandments of how to win, how to hire a staff. Just real quick, what was that like, that experience?
Bill, when Bill approached me, and I had worked for Bill previously and then had gone, I went down to San Diego State, Utah State. Denny and I reconnected. We had met on Bill's staff. Denny gets the head job at Stanford, and then we go to Minnesota. He takes me to Minnesota with him. And Bill had now retired. And Bill really wanted to do, Bill was always a big thinker, and he wanted to leave a legacy piece. The world according to Bill Walsh. This is what I want to put down. And so Bill had approached me because I had written some other books, some game planning books and the like, and of course having worked for him, and he knew I understood his process. So Bill approaches me, and I'm thinking, this is an unbelievable. I give Denny great credit because this is going to. I've got a day job. I'm the coordinator in Minnesota, but now I'm going to write this book with Bill Walsh, and so I put myself in a position of every coach in America. What would he want to ask Bill Walsh? What would he want to sit and visit? I put together a 150-page outline that Bill and I would get together back and forth. And just go down. Let's talk about this. So tell me about this. What do you see in terms of that? And Bill would just go and riff and was very detailed and articulated and down to detail. As you know, Bill, he was the ultimate teacher. Down to on the run that curl. I want that foot. I want that weight over the front of that foot. I want you to turn at this angle. Very precise, like you. We all both learn from very precise teaching method. And to just go through this mechanism. And I tell you, it's gratifying that when I ended up doing games for Fox, and I'd go and get to sit and visit with coaches, there wasn't a coach's office that I didn't sit in that there wasn't a copy of that book on the shelf.
You can't find a copy now.
No, not anymore. I tried to get him to reprint it, but we couldn't make that happen. It was.
You're writing that book while you're the offensive coordinator of the Vikings. He's writing working his ass off. He walks downstairs. If it's single high, throw it to fucking Randy. If it's split safety, hand it to Robert.
Easier.
I got to get back to my book.
Yeah, my wife and girls will tell you that was a time. Dad wasn't around a lot that year. Between coaching and spending that time, because what I'd do is I'd go out to San Francisco. He had an office there off of Menlo Park. In Menlo Park, that I'd sit and try to carve out a day or two that I could get with Bill. And it was interesting because Bill was at that point too. He was getting on the back end, and I could tell when he would get, because I'd pound him. I'd start pounding, and I could tell when he was getting tired. Yeah. And I'd have to, well, Bill, look, I got a lot to absorb here. I'm getting tired. I don't know that I could, let me take a break here and let's pick this up tomorrow. And then he would, this is again pre-internet, so he would fax me observations and things about that he wanted in the book, and I'd send him chapters that I put together based on what he said, and then he'd add, well, let's add this, let's add that. Amazing, and just to watch his mind work, so large, so comprehensive. It was amazing.
Last couple things I have is you know him better than anybody. Just maybe imitate him or give me a little. Like how was I really believe a great head coach has to thrive in adversity, because there's going to be wins. That's easy to run the ship. But when shit hits the fan, guys get hurt, owners on your ass, media's crawling up your face. Yeah. Maybe just a summary of how he handled.
Well, Brian is a professional cusser, much like I hear you are.
Well, I'm looking for some new material.
You guys need to talk, because he's got it all, and he's still got it. We play golf a lot. And it carries over to his golf game. I can tell you, it's some what up, right?
Yeah.
Or come on, Brian. Mm-hmm. He's very hard on himself.
He's a showman, isn't he? Yeah. I mean, didn't he have the fancy hat on Hard Knocks? I mean, you look like you were John Wayne walking around on the practice field.
How about that Hard Knocks, huh?
Yeah, wasn't that great?
It's
still the greatest episode of all time. They put me on Hard Knocks. I said, I don't want to be on Hard Knocks. I had Antonio Brown, Richie Incognito, and Montez Burfict.
Yeah.
We were like a freaking happy hour.
That was a disaster.
or that.
written all over it.
Yeah.
But your message, your way of getting your point across, you weren't always friendly. You could be.
Well, and you have to, because you have to you have to be in charge of it, as you know well. In dealing with the media, which is a factor. You can't, Bill Belichick has taken it to an art where it goes, well, I'm just not going to talk to you, and I'm just not going to deal with you. That's hard to do. You got to win a lot in order to get away with that. But I always felt, because of my PR background, I always felt like I'm gonna control the narrative, and I'm going to do so by putting it out there. I'm going to fill your notebook. I'm going to give you your clip, but we're going to do it on our agenda. Bill taught me that. Bill was brilliant in this. Bill would, again, this is pre-internet. Bill, and we were bad the first 2 years in San Francisco, and it was tough on Bill. But Bill, before he'd do his news conference, so I always remember on Tuesday morning, he'd come in and goes, he'd just pull something. He goes, tell me the last time a quarterback threw for consecutive 300-yard gains and lost. What's the record for that? Well, now you get on that, but then you had to call Elias, and he'd always come up with something out of the box. We had Steve DeBerg, and I knew what was happening.
Point.
Exactly right. Yeah. So, because Steve had thrown the ball up and down the field, but we had lost. So I'd dig around. I'd finally get the answer. I'd give it to him. He'd go into his news conference, and he'd sit there in the news conference. He'd be talking, and he would like it was just on the tip. He'd go, you know what, guys? He'd gear the conversation towards the way, and he'd go, I'm not sure of this. Check it. But I think this is right. But I think the last time a guy threw for 300 yard consecutive games and lost was so and so back. Well, I'd just given it to him 10 minutes ago. But he was like, it was just on the tip of his tongue, and he just checked that out, because he was going to send a message with the media, and he did, and he was going to control the narrative.
Brian, you wish they had Siri back then.
Oh my God, that would save my day.
You'd have been dangerous. I am so pissed off looking at you two guys. That AFC Championship game. The Super Bowl was in Tampa.
Oh,
I'm from Tampa.
Yeah.
And I didn't use that word Maximus. That's just I just knew this. If we get to the Super Bowl,
and you knew you were going.
I'm going home. That's where I'm from. And not only did I see you go into Tampa Stadium, but you had Aerosmith playing at halftime.
Double dipped?
That
see, I
really
didn't even know
pissed
that.
me. I'm thinking, these freaking guys, you knew you had that game from the jump, didn't you?
That team, the one thing I would reckon, the one confidence that I drew on as we went through the playoffs, because we had to go the wild card route. So we had to go the long way. We played Denver. We got to play them at home. Didn't cross the 50-yard line. Okay. We then go into Tennessee, who's everybody's favorite to win it all.
Yeah, no doubt.
But we had played them. They were in our division at the time. That was back when we had Jacksonville and Tennessee in what was then the AFC Central. So we were used to playing them. So we knew we could win. And we had beaten them in their place during the course of the season. Then we came to you guys and how good you were. But the thing I leaned on was, and I'd seen it team after team, if you hadn't played us, you just didn't know how good we were, how physical. It's like when we were back when we were in Minnesota and Green Bay and Barry Sanders. Mm-hmm. I used to love watching the film teams playing Detroit and Barry Sanders that hadn't played them before. We played them twice a year, right? So you're used to it. Tony Dungy, I remember trying to scheme to box in. You had to run this box defense with your defensive line to box in Barry Sanders because we had played them and we had known it. And it was always comical to watch teams play that had never played Barry before. And he made them look silly because you just can't play traditional. You got to approach it a different way. And I knew, and it was the same way in the Super Bowl, the shock to the system that you had when you realized just how good that defense was, and we're not going to be able to run the ball.
We were the number one rushing.
Right. So you had to believe we were going to be able to run.
We were slamming people, and Gannon could keep it.
Right.
But I remember, you know how it is in pregame warm-up, you can't help but look at the other team. You're up there, me and Bill Callahan, our coaches. I keep hearing, oh, shit. Yeah. We turn around. What is it? Look at Sharper. Did you know Sharper was that big, that linebacker? Yeah. Then you hear, oh, shit. Hey, look at these linemen. Oh, shit. Yeah. Then the game starts, and they got the white line, remember? Hey, get behind the white. Stand behind the white. I said, I'm going to get behind the white. I could get fucking killed down there. I mean, there were some big hits.
Yeah.
And then Jamal would carry the ball. And you talk about Derrick Henry, great finisher. great yardage after contact. Jamal would do that. You knew, I knew, we all knew Jamal's getting the ball. Right. We had guys on him. But he would just continue to fight for those extra yards. He'd wear you down, man.
Yeah.
And then the defense would knock us out at the end. But was that the most fun you had in coaching?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That crew and that coaching staff is absolutely the most fun. Learned a lot.
Yeah.
Learned a lot.
Learned
a lot coaching against you too.
You don't need to say that. I got an office down in Tampa. It's the Fired Football Coaches Association.
That's a large clientele.
How big is that office?
It's big. I'm going to put your picture in there. When you got fired, when was the last time you got fired? Tell the young coaches out there.
Last time I got fired, it was in Tampa. Yeah.
When you get fired, what's your advice to young coaches out there?
Don't take it personal.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
Move on.
And move on as quickly as possible. Because we've been fired. Every one of us in this room have been fired.
That's well
and
said.
it's going to happen.
I held a grudge, man. I'm going to get that son of a...
You got to let it go.
When you get fired, I mean, what would your recommend? I mean, you've seen it all. What would you say?
The recognition that is the industry. We go 13-3 in 2006 and end up losing to Indianapolis in the playoffs, who win the Super Bowl. The next year, I lose my quarterback, Steve McNair, his backup. I lose Ray. I lose Jonathan Ogden. Injury, which happens. You can't use an excuse, but it happens. And so we end up going 5-11, whatever, and get fired. And it was a shock to the system. That's the biggest thing that I regret. To answer your question directly to coaches, appreciate the job that you have. Because my last game was against Pittsburgh. We beat them. I get fired the next day, and it's the last time I coached. It's the last time I was on the field. Like the player that ends a career and you don't realize. It's one thing if you know it's your last game, and that's probably the one thing that stuck with me was to underline just when you're coaching, you have that opportunity, appreciate it because it's going to end, just like the players.
I'm always into the latest thing. Quarterbacks, gloves. What can help us grip the ball better? Helmets, lighter, more safety, whatever it may be. Now, shoulder pads. These were brought to my attention. You know a little bit about these shoulder pads. Tell me about what we got here.
We've been in for 13 years. Bob Broderick came to me, and Mike was involved with it. Technology has taken over everything. This is, from the get-go, the next iteration in pads. When you and I don't know about you, I didn't know what pads our guys were.
What is the name of this?
X-Tech is just that.
X-Tech.
It's the X is the big thing, just like Elon Musk and changing.
These are so light.
Well, and in the engineering of them, everything about it is. With 13 years we've been at it. Now it's AI driven. In that the old days, big guys had big pads and little guys had little pads. Now these are basically fitted through the database we have. 13 years. In terms of your height, your weight, your position, your injury history, that are basically isolate the pad to best suit what you need. That's why it's better 90% of the professionals all wear X-Tech pads, top college, high school. And the best thing I love now, we're down on the youth pad. I got 2 grandsons. You got grandsons.
Yeah, one of the X-Tech top guys came to the Raiders, put his hand underneath this pad, and smashed it with like a hammer. And it didn't even flinch him.
Yeah.
I mean, these things are incredible. X-Tech. Where can you get them?
Yeah, go to xtechpads.com or on Instagram at xtechpads. This is what our young people need to have on in this great game. It's a physical game. It's a dangerous game. They got to be in the best protection possible.
They should wear these in The Walking Dead. X-Tech. You ever see that movie?
Yes, I did.
It's my favorite movie.
One of my favorites, John.
Fucking X-Tech.
Walking Dead. Is that about coaches?
Yeah, it is.
Is that a coaching movie?
It's about us. Love you, brother. Good to see you, man.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.